All right, guys, Murph and Leia are here. And today we're going to do a little discussion comparing shotguns against handguns in defensive type situations. Now, longtime viewers of the channel will note that I've done a lot of videos comparing shotguns, and that's because I find shotguns lacking in an awful lot of things, and I enjoy discussing those types of aspects and putting them up against different types of weapons, even things within the shotgun category as well. And I've gone over a lot of the same points ad nauseum because this is not necessarily a series in which you have to start at the beginning in order to be able to get all of the data. This is supposed to be something that you can pick up wherever it is that you want so that you can educate yourself, or at the very least pull some data points to be able to help inform your decision. Everything in the firearms world is a conscious trade-off. What is important is to be conscious of the trade-off that you are committing. All too often, somebody walks into a gun shop, somebody sells them on an idea, they give them money, they receive gun, they go home. They don't put any more critical thought or discussion into what it is that they're doing. And that's folly. We got to make sure that we understand all the context and nuance of the decisions that we make so that we can make the most informed decision. And that's what this channel is largely based around. Now, why don't we go ahead and set the scene a little bit in this overall conversation. A couple of key points that are constants throughout the channel. Like the first being, if I know I'm going into a gunfight, I want a long gun. I want the additional point of contact that a stock affords me. I want the greater power and all those types of things associated with either an intermediate cartridge, a full power rifle cartridge, or a shotgun shell loaded with either a slug or buckshot. Those are the types of things that I want. If I know 100% I am walking into this, I'm walking into a fight. There is no doubt in my mind, somebody's not leaving where it is that we're about to go. We are fighting. So, hi. You want to come hang out? So, with that being the case, even if I just leave my immediate area of safety, the immediate town that I live in or anything along those lines, I will start bringing a long gun with me. Not because I'm going to carry it. Anybody who open carries an AR-15 or anything along those lines does so for attention, not for any type of practical purpose. I have had to carry long guns for extended periods of time as a part of like my day job, and it's not fun. It's really great when you finally get to take that thing off and set it down for a little bit and like relax. So then, when it becomes to road trips or leaving my immediate area or any of those types of things, the long gun is now something that I'm fighting my way to. If I get into a gunfight, if I get into a situation that I think warrants me needing to get to a long gun, I'm going to work my way towards it. It's kind of the same thing in like police methodology. Handguns are far more convenient to carry than long guns, even for a police officer. And a police officer just doing a traffic stop doesn't necessarily need to have his AR-15 out. It's actually going to be very restricting to the rest of the stuff that he needs to do. So he might approach that car with just his handgun, and then a fight may ensue where he has to work his way back to the cover of his vehicle, and then also a higher casualty producing weapon if we put it into a military maxim at that point. So then I want to fight to my long gun. If I go on a road trip, I take a long gun, and I also bring my body armor. Is it very likely that I'm actually going to get to employ my body armor even in the low probability of me getting into a gunfight? No, probably not, but I like having it available, because I don't want to be caught flat-footed or unprepared. Had that happened before, don't really care to repeat it. So, as always, as we say on this channel, I want a long gun if I'm getting into a fight. And the other consistent theme on this channel is handguns are inferior fight stoppers. It does not matter which of the popular self-defense caliber handgun options you pick. All of them are suboptimal fight stoppers. Even if they're achieving, which many of these options are, even if they are achieving FBI standards for penetration and expansion and all those types of things, they ultimately still do not necessarily lead to fast fight stopping characteristics. We're looking for those reactions in target media that actually result in ending the fight. Rifles will do that. Even if you get a short-barreled rifle, something that's not at the optimal length, like a 10-3 5.56, fired at the same distances that you would shoot a handgun, it is generating more than enough energy. It's creating a very large temporary wound channel. It's doing all the things that you want a bullet to do in order to be able to end that fight. Handguns struggle to do that. And especially if you push the distances out a little bit further, handgun cartridges really struggle because they're not designed for distance. They shed velocity very rapidly. A lot of the velocities we talk about with handgun cartridges are at the muzzle. And that's only going to go down as they travel, whereas rifle cartridges are built to be ballistically viable at distance. They're built to be streamlined so that they retain that velocity for a greater distance, so that they maintain accuracy over distance. Handgun cartridges are not. So I don't want to fight with a handgun cartridge if I can avoid it. Now, that takes us into the discussion of PCCs. PCCs kind of fall into the long gun category because you get that additional point of contact and all this kind of stuff, Murph. SMGs like the MP5 and all those types of things. But if you're looking at getting into a PCC for defensive type measures, you're doing so because there's a conscious trade-off that requires you to do that. So I sometimes, or quite frequently, carry with me on the daily a 9mm AR-9 SPR in a backpack. And I do that not because it's optimal to fight with a handgun cartridge out of that particular platform, because there's magazine interchangeability with, say, like my Glock 26. So if I'm out concealed carrying my Glock 26, for whatever reason need to employ my PCC, I can feed my PCC with the magazines that I have for my Glock 26, as well as any of the dedicated magazines I brought for the PCC. I have more ammunition at that point. It's a perfect pairs concept, which if you're interested in that discussion, go ahead and check out the link in the description of that video. So there's really not a circumstance where I would prefer to choose a pistol cartridge. And when you also consider that through a combination of like velocity and mass, all pistol cartridges wind up at some point generating about the same amount of energy. All the popular options, 9mm, 40, and 45, you will find options in all three of those calibers that come out to the same energy. It's why I don't get into a discussion of which one of these is better than the other. I'm more interested in the nuanced discussions based around the platforms that they go into. What it has a combination of capacity, size, weight, a grip that fits my hand, and all those types of things that also allows me to be able to shoot the gun fast and accurately in order to be able to produce the fight-stopping characteristics of multiple hits on an enemy combatant. That's what I'm looking at that point. So this discussion that we're having here today, with these ideas firmly in mind, who is the target of this discussion that we're having here today? This is primarily a discussion in home defense type principles. It kind of applies if you're somebody who, like me, keeps a long gun in the car and your intent is to fight to it, or if you're like a police officer and you might wind up having to fight to your gun in order to be able to employ it in whatever situation it is that you have going on. So you're using a handgun to get to the long gun. For the most part, I think this belongs in the home defense realm. Why is that? Well, for a couple of reasons. There are quite a few gun owners out there who don't have vast collections. Blows my mind. Can't even fathom that. And really, a big collection is kind of a very personal thing. There are a lot of people out there who feel they have very large collections, and then they see my collection and they go, oh, wow, you've got a lot of guns. And then I go, ha, ha, ha. There are people out there who make my collection look like kids play. And a lot of times my friends cite me as the reason to their wives why they should be able to buy more guns, because they don't have as many guns as I do, so they don't have that big of a collection. That argument never works. Don't try it. When we're talking about home defense type situations, these people who don't have very many guns might have at some point been recommended that a shotgun is their ideal home defense option by, some FUD at a gun shop. Or they might have been gifted or passed down a shotgun, and that's what they're using for their home defense option. In addition to that, you might have somebody out there who really doesn't see a need to have a whole bunch of guns, so they might have just one gun that they conceal carry and use for home defense. And there are guns out there that I think would work very well for this category. As I previously reviewed in the FN509C video, if you're interested in that, link in the description. That would be a great option for that type of thing, as with the CZP-10S. These are guns that are large enough that you can put lights and optics on them while also still being small enough to conceal carry. And that could be a one-size-fits-all type solution for you. This is also where a lot of people say the Glock 19 comes into play, because they could, even if you were in like a duty type capacity, Glock 19 is large enough for duty, it's large enough for self-defense, or it's like in that middle ground, like that Goldilocks area, both large and small enough for self-defense. And then also it's a good bedside option as well. So the question becomes, are either of these people doing themselves a disservice with their firearm? Their firearm selection that they have. Now, you could be like me, where I have a bedside gun which is somehow a threat has managed to get through my layered defenses and all the way into my bedroom. That is what that handgun is for. I then have a ready rack and a war chest. Both of these are for if I hear a bump in the night, I can grab something and then go investigate what it is that's going on and have at that point a more powerful option available to me than what a handgun affords. All right, guys, now that we've kind of like set the scene, gone with some of our guiding principles and what it is that informs this discussion and how it is that we're kind of, the background that we're placing this topic against, let's go ahead and start discussing the pros and the cons between shotguns and handguns. One of the biggest things that we're going to talk about here is going to be size and weight. Shotguns obviously are very long. Handguns obviously are very small. We're talking about handguns, guns that fit in the hands, not braced pistols or adding a stock and or a brace to your pistol or having something like a flux chassis or something along those lines. That is not necessarily what it is that we're discussing. That'll be a separate topic for another time. We're talking about literal handguns, things that you would carry on your body. And I don't mean, there was a gun shop that I went to for a little while where a guy had a flux, like a SIG P320 dropped into a flux chassis that he had like clipped to his belt. It's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Not that type of carry. Actual like in holster, reasonable person attempting to conceal carry type of carry options, or a handgun type option that would fit into a holster. So pistols are very small, and that's advantageous in a variety of manners. So they will easily fit into like a bedside safe or something along those lines. And a bedside safe is important if you're concerned about somebody getting access to the firearm that you don't want to have access to the firearm, but you still want rapid access to your gun. You can do the same kind of thing for long guns. You can have like safe systems that wrap around the receiver and deny access to the trigger guard and all that kind of stuff. But you might have to contend with your significant other in trying to set one of those up. A bedside safe is fairly small and unobtrusive. It's not necessarily something that might offend the senses of your significant other who's trying to build like a certain vibe in the bedroom. Having a shotgun bolted to the wall might throw off the feng shui of the room. And keep in mind, guys, like a home is made up by two people, so you can't necessarily take over all of the aspects of the decorating or the decor of the home and have your significant other not happy with it. It's not going to be worth it long term. Oh yeah, I know. What are you doing? Stay still. Okay. So that kind of plays into also the convenience factor of handguns. That is the whole point of why handguns, stop that, are a popular option to begin with, because they are so convenient. Whereas shotguns or long guns in general are going to be more cumbersome in a lot of ways. In addition to that, if you are in a situation where you are going to move towards the threat in a bump, something goes bump in the night type situation, a handgun might be more advantageous to you given certain circumstances. Now, something to keep in mind here, guys. First off, you need to have a home defense strategy. You need to know what the plan is before something goes bump in the night. You need to go ahead and establish where your zones of fire are and all that kind of stuff. Are family members going to come to you, or are family members going to stay where they're at? Can you possibly secure a floor and not necessarily have to go out to meet the threat and play cat and mouse in your own home? Or can you just like barricade in one position and wait until the cavalry arrives? Or do you not have anyone else who lives with you and you're just going to cover your bedroom door, and there's going to be very few circumstances that require you to come out of your place of safety in order to be able to pursue somebody else? If you have a roommate, making sure you deconflict lanes of fire so you don't wind up shooting each other. Those are the things that you need to look into before you make these decisions. So, like my previous home, didn't really have to worry about securing anybody. The only thing that would really have brought me out of my barricade situation would have been if somebody had gone towards the gun room, which I had the ability to be able to monitor whether or not that would be happening. The gun room was locked. So if somebody decided that they, stumbled upon my cache of weapons and were going to try to make themselves better armed than I was, I needed to make sure that I was going to come out and meet that threat. Otherwise, I was just going to cover the door and wait for the cavalry to arrive. In addition to that, my house had a lot of blind corners to where I was on a significant disadvantage trying to come out and do single man CQB, which if you guys haven't ever done CQB, single man CQB is about the worst version of CQB that you can do. So that's not necessarily a game that I want to play in that particular circumstance. Now, where I live now, I can cover the stairway. And by covering the stairway, I can protect anybody that I might need to protect at the time. And I also don't necessarily have to fight on a stairway in order to be able to counter a threat, because that's not necessarily a thing that I want to do either. There's not really a good way to clear a stairway, especially if you're there by yourself. So if you're working in a situation where you might have a lot of tight corners and all that kind of stuff, a shotgun might be very space intensive for you in that case. One of the issues with shotguns is that they're very long in order to be able to have them in their standard configuration. So you're stuck at an 18-inch barrel if you don't want to have an NFA item in a shotgun. You had a stock, that's a very long setup. Now you can go to a pistol grip only shotgun, and we've talked about pistol grip only shotguns against stocked shotguns here previously on the channel, link in the description. However, you lose that additional point of contact. So now you start to pick up some of the pros and cons of having a handgun. Pistol grip only shotgun's very compact, it's very easy to tuck away and all those types of things. But now we're losing potentially some accuracy and all that kind of stuff that we would have with a long gun. The handgun and the pistol grip only shotgun are going to pie those corners better, but how is it going to impact your engagement once it is that you're able to challenge that intruder? Now, of course, whenever it is that we talk about the size disparity between shotguns and handguns, we also have to talk about capacity, because in order to be able to have more capacity with the shotgun has to be longer. You wind up going past that 18-inch barrel if you want to have more than 6 rounds in the gun, 7 rounds in the gun, 8 rounds in the gun. And once you start putting those extended tubes on and all those types of things, you are massively increasing the length of the shotgun. It's not necessarily a benefit to your situation. Potentially, if you're just covering a door, it doesn't really change anything. The gun can be as long as you want. You can go all the way to poking the door from your bed. That's fine. But if you actually have to come out and fight, that's a problem. Now, of course, you can go with something like a shockwave, or you can have an NFA item, and I see no issue with having NFA items, but now you've diminished the capacity. And that may not necessarily be a positive interaction in your home defense situation. Whereas with handguns, not only do you have good capacity to begin with, as much if not more than a shotgun, it's still relatively compact. Even if you put an extendo in there, it's not, it may not necessarily be the best option to like put in with your gun into the bedside safe, or it may not be the best option to carry. But if it was your reload, the extendo doesn't really compromise your space aspect of the handgun. Like, yeah, you got something hanging out of the bottom of it, but if you have it tucked in close to the body for a lot of your time, it's no different than having to account for yourself to begin with. Even when you punch out, if you were conscious of the space that you're working around, it really shouldn't be too big of a snag point or anything along those lines. Shotguns have to increase your spatial awareness in order to be able to work around them. Now, a lot of times people say, well, you only need one. And that works out if you only have one threat. And what we found increasingly is that more than one person is possibly showing up to steal your stuff. Like, you got basically wrecking crews or moving crews coming in there, coming to take all your TV, your couches, everything. So if you're facing multiple combatants who might decide that they do want to make a fight out of it, you're going to need more than one round. Now, one of the advantages of a at least conventional shotgun with a stock on it is that you get that additional point of contact, which allows you to be more accurate. Make sure that those hits are going onto the targets that you want. Whereas with handguns, even at the relatively close distances involved in home defense type situations, you could still pull shots. I have, and I've seen plenty of others pull shots on close range targets that should not have been hard. It happens. Just because it's close doesn't mean that you can just dump your fundamentals. And one of the important things to keep in mind is that the vast majority of people are not as good with their fundamentals as they fool themselves into believing. Which is kind of getting closer to conclusions that we're not going to get into here just yet. Now, a con that is frequently pointed out when it comes to shotguns is that you can load a variety of different types of ammunition into them. You can have buckshot, slugs, less than lethal options, all those types of things. And I've discussed this ad nauseum on the channel. I actually even covered a lot of this in a Shotguns and Home Defense series, which if you're interested in that, go ahead and check out the link in the description. But I don't consider that to be as advantageous as a lot of people make it out to be. Some people like to cite like the Kel-Tec KSG as being fantastic because you've got 2 magazine tubes. So you can fill one with slugs and one with buckshot, or one with slugs and one with less than lethals, or whatever it is that it may be, and then you can switch between the 2 magazines as the situation unfolds. I'm not okay with that idea for a couple of reasons. One, Okay, you're sitting there and you're shooting buck, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, that target's a little bit further away than what I want to engage with buckshot. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit my selector, and now I've got slugs. Well, you've got slugs on hand, but what you've got in the chamber is whatever it is that you fired last. So if you didn't rack the round out of the chamber, you've still got buckshot in there. And you're potentially sending a bunch of buckshot at something that isn't going to get affected by buckshot. Now, okay, Murph, why is that so bad? All right, so I missed that shot. I rack in the next round. I've got slugs on hand. That's fantastic up until you consider that you just sent a hail of 32 caliber bullets somewhere. Where did those rounds go? What did they hit? And what are you now potentially liable for? Those are the type of things you have to keep in mind. When it comes to overpenetration, there's no advantage between handguns and shotguns. They're both potentially going to overpenetrate. You have to account for every shot that you send out there. Just like if you miss a shot with a handgun, or if you manage to not get your full shot pattern of buck on your opponent. Those are things that you have to take into account. Now, when it comes to that type of thing, my preference would be either you have a side saddle mount that has a different type of ammunition than what you have loaded in the gun, so that you can rack that round out, single load whatever it is that you need, and then take the shot that you have to take. Or at that point, you're feeding the magazine tube, racking that round out, and now you've got the round that you want on hand. Regardless, you're ejecting a round, or at best, you just fired and you're ejecting an empty to then slap in that slug to be able to get back to what it is that you need to do. When it comes to less than lethal stuff, I am not a fan of the concept of less than lethal loads, just like I'm not a fan of progressive loading. When we're talking about firearms, we need to be talking about the possibility of inducing death in your opponent, because that's the whole point of shooting them to begin with. You're trying to win the fight by neutralizing them. Either you cause so grievous a wound that they cannot continue the fight, or you kill them. Those are the options. Introducing less than lethal brings about a false sense of security. People think that they're protecting themselves legally or something along those lines. However, the legal matter of this went out the window as soon as somebody invaded your home, as far as like whether or not you have a right to take somebody else's life. The big thing about less lethal is it is called less lethal. That does not mean that it is non-lethal. You can still produce a lethal result utilizing less than lethal loads. And at that point, you might as well just shoot them with a slug. Why bother trying to play this middle ground when the result could potentially be the same? In addition to that, shooting somebody with, say, I don't know, rock salt, and them getting angry and shooting back at you with like live rounds puts you on the back foot. They are now fighting to kill, and you just now showed up to the fight, hopefully with something that can actually end it. You don't have birdshot loaded up next in like progressive loading. That's why I'm not a big fan of progressive load. So yeah, I don't really have that option in handguns, but if we take it from the standpoint of like fighting mindset and all those types of things, I don't consider that to be a bad thing at all. Now, reloads. Of course, reloads are a huge thing whenever it comes to handguns, or whenever it comes to firearms in general. So again, if I end it in one shot, then everything's fine. But you don't really want to plan for the minimum. You want to make sure that you have more ammunition on board. And that's why we like having more bullets. Bullets give me options. Having less bullets gives me less options. Handguns will hold more ammunition, and they're faster to swap out. I am inserting a magazine or a speed loader or something like that into a handgun to then get it back into the fight. Whereas with a shotgun, I'm more than likely going to have to single load, or at best, I somehow grabbed up like my competition rig and now I'm quad loading or something along those lines. I'm doing some John Wick stuff. However, that is still slower than just inserting a source of feed. Individually loading the rounds is going to be much slower, and you also have to be more aggressive in making sure that your shotgun is topped up. Whereas with a handgun, doing a tactical mag change is pretty fast, if you choose to do so. Now, there are, of course, magazine-fed shotguns out there and all that kind of stuff. However, there's a lot of reliability issues with those guns, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend those right off the rip. If you're picking a shotgun, in my opinion, you're picking more than likely a tubular-fed magazine. All right, guys. The only other thing that I think we need to discuss here is something that I heard here recently was somebody saying like, well, you know, they say that like an AR-15 or, you know, a handgun like has more capacity than a shotgun. But, you know, keep in mind that every time you fire around a buckshot, you're firing like 8 to 9, you know, rounds a buck, 8 to 9 individual buckshot. However, and so at that point, you know, if I've got 8 rounds, then I've got 72 rounds on hand. You only got 30 rounds in your magazine. However, all of those shots are going to the same place. So that's like me shooting every target 10 times. Whereas with a long gun, I don't necessarily have to worry about that. But the handgun, okay, maybe that's kind of a valid comparison at that point. I might have to shoot somebody 5-6 times in order to actually be able to produce a fight-stopping characteristic, depending on where their body is, you know, how it is that they're standing and where it is that I'm shooting from and what it is that I managed to hit, all those types of things. Sure, maybe that has a little bit of comparison, but all of those rounds are still destined for a single target, whereas I could end the fight in 1 round with a handgun, but I have to shoot 8 to 9 in a swarm out of a shotgun in order to be able to replicate that same outcome. So I found that to be a really weird flex and kind of lacking some context, so I want to go ahead and address that here. All right, guys, that's our discussion portion of the pros and cons. Why don't we go ahead and put these ideas into action by putting some guns on the timer and discussing the results and all those types of things. Now, a couple of caveats before we get into this. First off, guys, I've been doing these comparisons with a wide variety of different types of shooting drills. It's not like we've been creating a comprehensive body of knowledge just based around a singular set of shooting drills. And it's for 2 reasons. One, because I'm not trying to create a comprehensive set. This is for my own entertainment as much as it is for yours. And then 2, everything that I do on the range is to not only generate content for the channel and the Facebook page, which you're interested in the Merciless official Facebook page, link in the description, but also it is my training time. It is to progress my skill and all those types of things. So I'm going to shoot different types of drills so that I can train different types of things, get reps on different types of things. In addition to that, none of this is scientific, so keep that in mind as well. All right, so let's go ahead and introduce our players that we will be using for this comparison. Starting off with this Maverick 88 chambered in 12 gauge that I have referred to as my 50 states legal truck gun. This has been reviewed and update reviewed. Links to both videos in the description. So this will be representing our home defense shotgun. And it'll be going up against this Glock 41 chambered in 45 ACP, also previously reviewed on the channel, link in the description. As you can see, it looks a little, if you've been with the channel for a while and you saw this video, you can see that it looks a little different now. All right, Murph, why did you choose these guns? Well, both of these guns are configured in a manner that I would use for both duty type use, if I was a police officer, as well as home defense. So they both have lights, they both have something to help them like reload and all those types of things. They are upgraded appropriately for the situation. So that is why we are comparing these 2 options against each other. All right, so that is what we're going to be taking to the range. Now, something else I want to identify for you guys so that's not weird here in a minute. I actually filmed this video in 2 sections. So right now, this is the pre-range section where I have discussed my preconceived notions and all those types of things, what my expectations are for how the range is going to go and all that. And then we're going to get into the actual drills and all that kind of stuff in the next portion that is going to be filmed post the range so that we can actually discuss like what it is that happened. Before we do that, I do want to go ahead and identify the 3 drills that we will be doing. Now, I generally do 3 drills, and then if I run into something that I found interesting in the process of going through the drills out on the range, I'll then develop that whatever nuance a little bit further. Whatever string it is that I uncovered, I'll pull that thread and figure out what it is that's going on. So, drill number 1 will be the descending ascending drill, which I just came up with right now, which is going to be on my steel targets. We're going to start on the largest, go to the smallest, and then work our way back up. All right, then we're going to do drill 2, which will be the bare standard drill with additional reloads, which we'll go over that more once we get into the shooting portion. And then drill 3, which is the William drill, which is generally 5 rounds to the chest, 1 to the head. This is going to be set up where it's going to be 5 rounds to the 2/3 steel silhouette and then 1 round to the head silhouette. So it'll be more, instead of being like top to, well, bottom to the top, it's going to go from left to right for that drill. All right, guys, so we're going to put these guns on the timer. We're going to see how things got developed, starting off with the descending, ascending drill, and I look forward to what the conclusions will be here after a bit.
Yep.
5.37 on the last one. All right, guys, and we're back fresh off the range and ready to discuss the results from the descending, ascending drill. All right, guys, for the descending, ascending drill, the pistol, the Glock 41, did it in 5.37, and the shotgun did it in 5.57. However, the pistol had 2 misses and the shotgun did it clean. Let's go ahead and discuss this a little bit further. First off, something to keep in mind, guys, those are dangling targets, and one of the issues with dangling targets is they do have a tendency to shift around a lot whenever it is that you hit them. So there's sometimes where you have your sights lined up on it and you're like 100% dead to rights. I've got this target. You squeeze the shot and then it dances out of the way. It's kind of annoying, especially as you start to stack hits on something. However, that's making excuses. We're not trying to make excuses on this channel as much as clarifying what it is that happened. The data still stands. The pistol had 2 misses. The shotgun, on the other hand, has a good relationship with the dancing around of the targets because as you cycle the action, it gives it more time for the target to settle. In addition to that, I'm sending out multiple projectiles, which is one of the key points of a shotgun. A shotgun's meant for moving targets. So it's unsurprising that a shotgun would do well in this case because in order to be able to register a hit with the shotgun on this course of fire, all I need to see is the steel move. And that's plenty easy to do as I'm going up and down the scales there. Now, in addition to that, the shotgun has an additional point of contact. We talked about this previously. This gives me more opportunity in order to be accurate as I move across the course of fire, whereas with a handgun, I have to be on my fundamentals and all that kind of stuff, especially whenever it is that we're talking about this Glock 41. Because I do have to be really on all of my fundamentals with this gun in order to be able to shoot it well. So, not a surprise, the shotgun cleared that course of fire exceedingly well. With that, why don't we go ahead and get into the bare standard drill with additional reloads. Now, how did I modify this drill? Because the bare standard drill is 13 rounds and like 2 mag changes. So you fire 5 rounds into a target, you change magazines, fire 5 rounds into that target, and then fire 3 rounds into a head target. Obviously, that's not going to work out with our Maverick 88 because it only holds 6. So I decided to break it into 2 5-shot strings with a 3-shot string with a reload in between each because that worked well with the amount of magazine pouches I had for my Glock 41, as well as my abilities to be able to keep this shotgun loaded. Now, with that being the case, I also decided that this drill would look more interesting if I shot it like a duty person who required the use of a shotgun. So for this drill, I pulled out my kit, which I here recently have added a shotgun shell carrier to, as well as my duty belt, which I recently just got this Red River Tactical holster for this Glock 41. In addition to the fact that since I recently decided that I was going to keep this Glock 41, that I've made some modifications to it and stuff like that. So this is actually really the first time I've had this Glock 41 seriously out to the range in some time, and I'm testing out a whole lot of gear. So I had my shotgun shell card here on this side of the shotgun, and then I used the outside Velcro on the pouch on my kit in order to be able to attach another shell card, so that I didn't have to deal with opening the Velcro enclosure of the shotgun pouch. So with those things, why don't we go ahead and check out that shooting footage. All right, the pistol cleared the course of fire in 21.47, and the shotgun did it in 39.13. However, things get even more interesting. The pistol had 3 misses, not a good start, but the shotgun had 1. Technically 2. We'll discuss that more here in a second. Now, when we incorporate misses, if we take it into like normal competition grading and all that kind of stuff, the pistol pretty comprehensively stomped the shotgun in this case. Even with my fumbled reload. Again, haven't really worked with this gear and all this kind of stuff, so still working with kind of like some of the spatial awareness. And I kind of fumbled one of the reloads. Luckily, I was doing it in my workspace. I was able to trap it against myself and then get the magazine into the gun. Now, the first thing I want to talk about here is that it was the reloads that really changed the dynamic here. With this pistol, all I've got to do is pull another packet of ammunition, another magazine out of one of these pouches. And then I can have the gun very quickly back into action. With the shotgun, that is not the case. I have a lot more manipulations. I have to feed the rounds individually because I'm not really set up for like quad or double loading or anything along those lines. And even with double loading, this still would have taken much longer than just inserting a magazine. Even with the fumble, I'm pretty sure the shotgun still would have been beaten. So this is where, if you're in a situation where you're engaging a lot of opponents or you're expecting to be an extended gun battle, a shotgun is not necessarily the best option right off the bat. It's not necessarily a good default. Now, in addition to that, I had 2 malfunctions with the Maverick 88. I had one where I think I short-cycled the action, and then in the process of correcting that problem, I ejected a live round, which technically counts as a miss. And then at the end of shooting, I also had a stuck cartridge casing. Now keep in mind, guys, I was shooting a very old box of Winchester target loads out of this particular shotgun. And while it's definitely a help to the shotgun to shoot it with target loads instead of full house loads, faster on target, less recoil to manage and all that kind of stuff, ammunition malfunctions happen. Like, there's lots of possibilities for manufacturers to make mistakes and stuff like that. So people have a tendency to say that like shotguns never malfunction because they're so simple and all that kind of stuff, but that's not the case. Any mechanical system can fail, especially if it is heavily counting on the loosen up behind the butt, as Mac would say. If it's depending on a person to be able to reliably function it every time and all that kind of stuff, oddly enough, when you try to go fast, sometimes you wind up short-circuiting the shotgun. That's just a reality. Malfunctions take a lot longer to clear in a shotgun than they do in a handgun. Now, in the case of the stuck cartridge casing, that's a catastrophic failure. There's no coming back from that. I had to get a cleaning rod out. I tried using my pocket knife to get the cartridge casing out, but I didn't want to chip the tip of my blade and it wasn't coming out readily. So I had to get a cleaning rod together, punch that round out, punch that empty casing out in order to be able to get the shotgun back into the rest of the drills. So didn't happen at all with the handgun. Just something to take into account there when we talk about overall reliability. Shockingly enough, Glocks are reliable. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about drill number 3, the William drill. Now, a William drill is kind of like a bill drill. 6 rounds are fired, especially if you can count 6 rounds are fired, but you put 5 to the chest and then 1 to the head. Now, I'm not shooting paper because if I shot paper with a shotgun, I wouldn't have anything left to talk about. So shooting steel on my steel targets, I decided that it would be 5 shots to the C-zone steel and then 1 shot to the small head size steel. So let's go ahead and check out that footage. All right, guys, the pistol did the William drill in 3.29, and the shotgun did it in 4.79. However, the pistol did it with 1 miss, meaning that the shotgun took the overall drill clean. Which, you'll note that keeping within the capacity of the shotgun performed quite well. The handgun's not necessarily a slouch, it's more of a fault on myself, but if we're looking at the raw data here, oddly enough, 3 points of contact and work and not having to conduct any other type of malfunction clearance or reload, the shotgun performed not necessarily faster, but more precisely, which I will take fast precision or fast enough precision over really fast misses anytime. So with that being the case, the shotgun took 2 drills overall. Let's go ahead and get into our conclusions portion here. How do I interpret this information that I've generated here today? I see 2 things. One, it's not a shock that something with an additional point of contact shot more accurately or more reliably accurately than a handgun. We talked about this beforehand, where it's very easy. Even if you dump your fundamentals, it is very easy to throw shots. That's just the reality. And all too often, I've seen in competitions and stuff like that, somebody get too focused on the target and not necessarily their fundamentals and the combination and combining those 2 ideas, and they wind up throwing what should have been very easy shots. The shotgun was not as amenable to that type of situation. However, I think a very key aspect of this, if it comes to multi-shot engagements and all those types of things, is that the shotgun is more involved whenever it comes to any other type of manipulation, malfunction clearance, reloads, all those types of things. And with that being the case, the handgun stands out for its own version of simplicity. If I had had a malfunction on this handgun, it would have been a tap rack, get back into it. The standing malfunction that I have with this gun was more or less cleared by that. I attempted to pull the trigger, the gun didn't go off. I ran the action, I had another click, but then after that I had a live round in the chamber. Like the gun, I knew the gun was going to get back into action. It was just a matter of how long was I going to have to manipulate it in order to be able to do that. With a handgun, most of the time it's the same kind of thing, unless you have a double feed, in which case it's strip out that magazine and get a fresh magazine in and then get back into your fight. Handguns are pretty simple to be able to clear most malfunctions on. Shotguns, not necessarily so, given certain factors. Now, if we're talking about a shotgun in a duty type application, the argument of, well, you know, it's only good for as long as it's loaded kind of doesn't hold as much water, because I can engage with this shotgun for the duration of its loaded capacity, and then if it runs out, if I'm in a duty type sense, when this gun runs out, I can transition to my duty pistol and stay in the fight that way up until I get to a place where I can plus up my 3 points of contact option in order to be able to continue to fight that way. So I don't have to stick, I can be fluid. I don't have to stick with the shotgun the entire time. When the situation allows, I can transition to a secondary and then move back, reload the secondary, and then get back into topping up my shotgun so that I can get that more powerful option, that better fight stopping ballistics, along with the additional point of contact and all those types of things. So in the duty type sense, I don't necessarily think the shotgun is the most limiting thing, aside from range or some of the other things that we already talked about. If we're talking about just straight shooting, the shotgun has a place and the handgun still has a place. If we're talking about in the home, the easiest catch-all answer is, at the end of the day, physiology and training are going to be the most crucial things. If you're some petite thing, be it man or woman, doesn't really matter, and a shotgun is just going to beat you up and you're not going to be able to effectively defend yourself with it, then a shotgun's not the option for you. If you're somebody who is of a physical constitution capable of being able to withstand the recoil of a shotgun as well as manage a handgun, either option is fine as long as you're training with them. Given the data that we derived here today, I think a shotgun still technically is the better option between the two. Only because the average person assesses that they will not have to reload in a home defense situation. Now, seeing as a lot of times home invasions look like, mini moving companies looking to commit crime, maybe a shotgun doesn't effectively fit into your defensive parameters. So even though the data here supports it, the situation may not. And the data in this case being the results of the drills that we had to discuss here today, not necessarily home invasion data. I think in a lot of ways, home invasion data probably better supports the pistol overall. All right, guys, I think that pretty much covers my thoughts on this particular subject. What are your conclusions based off the data that was provided here today? Other than that, that's pretty much what I got. Have a good day.